The good news, there's $275 million left in the Virginia Rent Relief Program. I also confirmed that the Virginia Mortgage Relief Program has another $213 million, and you can apply for both funds yourself. You can imagine how taxing that is on their resources with more than 40,000 cases just last week. The bar all the way to the right there. In just the next couple of months, Richmond has 731 eviction hearings scheduled. That's the most out of any jurisdiction in the state. Henrico and Chesterfield also have several hundred on the docket, and I can tell you those numbers may only get worse. And Taylor isn't alone. In Henrico, rent shot up about $185 a month from last year. A judge or jury may ultimately have to decide if there's a difference between a wild animal and what would be considered a pest, like a bee, a rat, or even a snake. After intense outcry from out-of-work Virginians who weren't getting their benefits, the VEC added hundreds of staffers and an upgraded computer system. But the most recent data I found shows the agency is still lagging far behind in critical areas.
When the pandemic hit the VEC, the agency was at a 50-year low in funding, as well as received in 1 week 50 times the normal number of unemployment claims. So it really set up a perfect tsunami.
New VEC Commissioner Carrie Roth says she's been working to bail out that tsunami of problems since she was named to the post by Governor Glenn Youngkin in January.
They also had outdated technology and no clear pathway for how to handle this workload.
The VEC has added about 1,000 workers since the beginning of the pandemic, but it was a long wait to get that additional staff despite being in crisis mode and not being prepared to handle the spike of 2 million unemployment claims, according to the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission.
The agency did not get any assistance with additional staff, call center staff, customer service staff until 1.5 years into the pandemic.
Roth says the VEC and unemployed Virginians had to wait months for the General Assembly to approve more funding. Now the agency has over 1,800 employees as opposed to just 800 in March of 2020.
Just in the call center alone, there was additional 500 folks. We're actually in a place right now where we are ramping down.
After a class action lawsuit headed by the Legal Aid Justice Center, the backlog of 92,000 adjudication cases was cleared, and the VEC launched a new website last fall with better fraud safeguards and easier online tools for claimants and employers.
So all of the claims work that goes back and forth through employers, instead of being paper-based, it's going to be all electronic-based.
But NBC 12 continues to receive complaints every week from people still waiting on benefits, who need their cases resolved or who just can't get through to the VEC, particularly online.
I've sent them letters and I've called them and get no response.
Mary O'Brien has received dozens of letters from the VEC saying she owes back $3,900 in unemployment overpayments.
They're telling me that I owe everything back now.
More than 335,000 Virginians received that same overpayment notice, the mistake at no fault of their own. Mary filled out the waiver that would potentially forgive that money, but still no resolution.
They're holding my income tax. I'm struggling. I'm paycheck to paycheck.
NBC 12 confirmed the VEC is currently working to recover nearly $860 million in overpayments improperly made during the pandemic. On top of that, the new online portal has glitches, triggering 60% of logins right now to fail.
Other folks are having trouble figuring out how to unfreeze identity verification issues.
Attorney Pat Levy-Lavelle defended Virginians waiting for benefits in the federal lawsuit against the VEC.
What we care about is making sure that every Virginian who's filed a legitimate unemployment claim gets answers, gets a fair shot as soon as possible at getting their benefits. And there's still a lot of people out there waiting.
Despite the boost in staff, the VEC still has a significant case backlog. According to the Department of Labor, Virginia ranks 10th from the bottom when it comes to getting first-level appeals cases resolved within 21 days. And I can tell you, it used to be worse than that. During the height of the pandemic, Virginia was second to last. Right now, the VEC is working through nearly 46,000 of these cases. As for second-level appeals, which require in-person hearings, Virginia averages a 310-day wait before the case is heard. That's the second worst in the country, with 52,000 cases currently waiting.
The amount of work can't be underestimated.
Roth admits the VEC is not where it needs to be yet, but she says they've made some progress and are continuing to forge ahead with improvements.
These are real people with real lives that we are impacting.
Now, as of July 1st, a new state law went into effect to help make sure the VEC has more oversight and continues making progress. For example, the agency was ordered to simplify documents for claimants, get regular feedback from the public, and create a resiliency plan for the future, how to better handle a huge spike of unemployment claims. People are opening up lease renewals right now and finding shocking rent increases, literally $700 more per month. Now, these astronomical hikes are all legal, but I did find some things you can do to try to help your situation.
We have to move. We have to move. We can't afford the new rent.
Erica Taylor and her husband are now moving with their 3 children out of their Henrico townhome. Her lease renewal demanding an additional $521 a month starting in April.
They told us that it's market rate and that they're actually keeping us below market rate.
And Taylor isn't alone. In Henrico, rent shot up about $185 a month from last year. That's a 28% increase and the highest in the Richmond region. And here's what the rest of RVA is facing when it comes to shocking lease renewals. It's about a $123 jump per month across our area. Nationwide, rent is up a staggering 17.6% compared to last year. Landlords and property managers say they're keeping up with market rates or what everybody else is charging, according to Patrick McLeod of the Virginia Apartment Management Association.
What we're seeing is a function of basic economics of supply and demand.
Experts say a lot of things that usually keep the housing market fluid paused during COVID. Construction of new apartments was at a standstill. People didn't move nearly as much because of government subsidies like the Virginia Rent Relief Program and a pause on evictions. So vacancies in the Richmond area have now plummeted to a 20-year low at this point. Experts tell me a historic lack of affordable housing in the Richmond area has also added to the squeeze.
Richmond has had a shortage of affordable housing for decades, and so it's a ripple effect throughout the entire housing market that just pushes prices up because we have a shortage of housing at the lower end. We certainly have a lot of people contacting us about problems paying rent.
More people are also now able to work remotely, so they're deciding to move out of the bigger cities. Richmond looks pretty enticing.
You see a lot of influx into either sort of second-tier towns or places like beach towns, much more lifestyle focused, where people say, I'm going to move here because I can work, anywhere.
Other factors, rising inflation, making the cost of almost everything more expensive, and a supply chain shortage that can cause delays on new construction, all adding to some of the biggest rent hikes we've seen in decades.
I mean, you could call it price gouging, you could call it the way a normal free market operates. But again, a free market is not necessarily a fair market. I would be very surprised if landlords are incurring a 20-30% increase in cost. I mean, the biggest cost of a landlord is their mortgage, and that's a fixed cost.
Could these increases legally be considered price gouging? I asked the Office of Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares. A spokesperson responded that price gouging only applies to hikes on goods and services during a state of emergency, which Virginia is no longer in. It is possible to charge a 30% increase, but should you, just because you can, is that ethical?
I think for everyone who's looking at their retirement counts, the answer would be yes. Everyone in multifamily is usually managing a property for a group of investors, and people expect the return to be what the market will get them.
So what can you do aside from moving out, which is a tough reality for many like Erica?
My son has to go to a new school. It's going to be sad to, uproot him and have him start over again.
Experts suggest trying to negotiate with your landlord. Perhaps see if they'll accept a lower rate if you can pay a few months in advance or sign a longer lease. If they don't budge, try asking for upgrades to your apartment instead. And remember, in Virginia, your landlord must inform you of any rent hikes or changes within the time frame stated on your lease. Usually that's 30 to 60 days before it renews. If you do end up moving, the hassle may be a better sacrifice than draining your wallet every month, spending well over the recommended 30% of your income on housing.
I just talked to one of my neighbors down there, and they're moving. Well, what else is going to happen, you know? And we find a new place, and then how long before that rent goes up to a price that we can't afford?
So tough right now, and these rent hikes are now pushing a lot of current tenants to try to buy homes, investing instead of renting. But there's a tough battle in the housing market now as well. New home prices soared nearly 19% last year. During the pandemic, hundreds of thousands of Virginians waited desperately for months for unemployment checks. They couldn't get through to the VEC since the agency was drowning in a tsunami of claims, a lack of staffing, and outdated technology. So the state started rushing out payments without fully vetting cases. And as you can imagine, many people gamed the system.
The VEC is now working to investigate nearly 280,000 fraudulent claims since March of 2020.
How much was lost to unemployment fraud here in Virginia?
Our potential fraud, which is what we're working through in a significant way right now, is over $1.5 billion.
I sat down with the agency's new commissioner, Carrie Roth, who was appointed by Governor Glenn Youngkin. Roth says $100 million is already confirmed as definitely being stolen. The rest of the $1.6 billion is still being investigated. The VEC now partnering with the state attorney general's office to prosecute more fraudsters swindling your tax dollars.
We're going to go after the rings, and we're going to go after individuals.
Like 30-year-old Sadie Mitchell from Midlothian. She pleaded guilty to stealing more than $1 million in government assistance during the pandemic, filing at least 20 fraudulent unemployment claims using the identity of inmates. Now she'll be one herself for up to 30 years in prison come sentencing this August. To help combat future fraud, the VEC's new website, which went live last fall, has a slew of safeguards, possibly too many, since about 60% of Virginians who now try to log on can't, according to the VEC's own data.
When I try and log in, it tells me I'm not in the system, and when I try and create a new login, it tells me I'm already in the system.
Diane Stanley still can't log into the VEC's user portal. Her unemployment claim was denied because she was mistakenly flagged for fraud. Her attempts to straighten out the situation with representatives have been futile.
So I've sent them 3 sets of my proof of identity. I call it at least every other day, if not every day.
And you haven't received a dime?
No, ma'am.
Attorney Pat Levy-Lavelle with the Legal Aid Justice Center headed up a class action lawsuit against the VEC for its inability to get benefits out in a reasonable time frame during the pandemic. He says many of the complaints now are from people locked out of the new portal.
These are bona fide claimants who have been trying to send in the documents that have been asked of them, but they're not getting answers, and they're still locked out of getting benefits due to these alleged unresolved identity issues.
Well, we have pretty strict safeguards on it. We're continually running tests, making adjustments. It's a balance that we're trying to strike to make sure that we are not keeping the Virginians who have earned these benefits out. But we also have to be mindful that those who are bad actors are also seeking new ways too.
How are you trying to reach those folks who are improperly flagged as being fraudulent when they're not?
We have a whole team that's dedicated to making calls through individuals.
A team of 75 VEC employees working to sort through red flags caused by claimants getting improperly targeted for fraud.
But I will tell you, in those phone calls that we have made to folks, about 50% of those phone calls are either lines that are disconnected, or we leave a voicemail and nobody returns the phone call.
A new state law that went into effect July 1st also requires employers to file electronically with the VEC. Roth says that will help speed up claims and weed out fraud, hopefully getting unemployment checks to those who truly need them faster.
and no one at the VEC has an answer and no one can help me.
After I reached out to the VEC about Diane's case, a representative did contact her, but still no resolution so far. We're going to keep up on that. And Commissioner Roth says they're also installing new technology online to more quickly verify somebody's identity if they're flagged for fraud. For the On Your Side investigators, I'm Kelly Avellino.